To Plone by Rob. I'm sorry for this.
Go for it.
Guillermo.
Pretty good, pretty good.
A round of applause, please.
Well, thank you. Um, yeah, so today I'm going to talk about Nick, what it is, and how it compares to Plone. A bit about me. I've been a Plone developer since I don't know 15 years, I guess, maybe more. Been using Zope for even longer than that. Been mostly doing front end stuff. You might have heard of some projects I created. Volto is one of them, and I did a lot of other stuff as well, Deco and Mosaic, other program, and the initial implementation of TinyMC. Yeah, I mostly do front end, but I occasionally do back end as well. And this talk is all about back end, so that's nice. So, what is Nick? Nick is a nearly headless CMS. I'll get to the nearly part in a bit. It's built on Node, so that's why a lot of people show up today, because everybody loves Node, right, in JavaScript. No? Oh, all right. Okay. Has a RESTful API, which is compatible with the REST API from Plone. So that means it's a one-on-one replacement. You can use it instead of Plone using the Volto front end. So why the name Nick? Anybody has a clue? Who doesn't know yet? Nope. As I said, it's a nearly headless CMS. So you might have heard of nearly headless Nick, which is from the Harry Potter books or movies, whatever you read or watched. So it's this guy. So he's nearly headless. So Plone or Nick is nearly headless. So everything is REST API except for one page, which returns the HTML, and you get this fancy ASCII art version of a nearly headless Nick. Anyway, so why did I create Nick? First of all, it's fun to build. So I like to build new stuff. And in the end, I will see if people actually use it. Like it took, I don't know, probably 4 to 5 years for people to actually start using Volto. I had it ready and I made this presentation about Volto. That was the way to go. And everyone was on the Angular bandwagon and they never used it. So maybe this is one of those stories as well, but we'll see. Yeah, so Plone has a great architecture. I think the whole way of doing stuff with Plone, all security-wise and every functionality, it's really nice. And if you want to rebuild something like that, it's a great way to learn the internals and how stuff is set up and what problems you actually run into. And as I said, Plone has a really great API. So the specifications for the API are really nice, well documented, and well thought of. So that's really a good contract to have. So basically, you know, what should I go for, and you don't have to think about that part. So I started creating this project in 2018 during the Plone Conf Tokyo. I usually like writing code during conferences or wherever, in a restaurant or at a party or in a bar, and I just continue and let's see where it goes. Another big advantage is the front end and the back end using the same language. JavaScript was always, well, not very popular within the Plone community. Really, especially back in the day, it was just like it's like a necessary evil. I think we even made some stuff to even not write JavaScript. Like maybe people remember KSS. I hope don't. Some people do. Paul was cheering just for the people at home. So that's why we didn't really like it. But now I think a lot of people from the front end new developers do turn into using Plone, who only have JavaScript or have mostly JavaScript knowledge. And if you want to teach the backend to them as well, you have to also learn Python and a lot of other stuff that comes with it. So if it's just one language, then the bar should be slightly lower. Yeah, so you can have a look at the website here. It's looks like this. It has all the fancy stuff, why you should use it, how you can start with it. There's an online demo. Looks like this, pretty similar to the Plone demo or to the Volto demo. You can just play around, log in, create some stuff, whichever you want. There's documentation. So the whole API is obviously documented. There's an introduction, how to get started, how to bootstrap your own project, and all of that. And all the endpoints are also specified on how you can do that. And of course, you can contribute. So far, I'm the only contributor. But if you have a bug or want to add a feature or anything else, documentation, you name it, anything is more than welcome. So what we will cover today, we're going to have a look at a bit of the architecture. So what does it look like? Also compared to Plone, obviously. That's what the talk is about. Then we're going to show some statistic of how it performs. And then have some performance tests from Nick and from Plone to see how that goes. We'll see. And then at the end, I have some examples of how you actually can create your website using Nick. So how some boilerplate code and everything, and to see how, I never should say easy, but at least for me it seems easy. Might not be for you, but I think it's a lot less code and a lot less stuff to worry about than you would have with Plone. But that's up to you to decide. So what does the architecture look like? So the issues with Plone, big disclaimer there, my opinion. That's why I'm here. I can say my opinion, so that's good. So I think Plone has a lot of legacy code, and you will see that later on in the slides. That means we have a lot of stuff to maintain, a lot of stuff which is probably not used anymore. Probably a lot of stuff which also people might or might not have to learn or have to avoid if they don't use it and don't need it. Yeah, as I said, a lot of code to maintain. I think deployment is rather hard in Plone. I think like the whole Docker thingy makes it slightly easier, but there's still a lot of stuff to do before you're able to set it up. There's a lot of scripts and wrappers around it, but it's probably because it's a bit harder than other projects to set up. Yeah, so Plone has a pretty complex stack. So let's see. So as you can see, so what does Plone use or used in the past? So it used Python, right? As you can see on all the white space, there's probably a big list coming up. We have Zope. You have to learn generic setup if you want to do anything, right? You have to know about CSML and what it is and how it should work. You know about page templates if you're using Classic. There's some REST API calls which you need to learn. There's YAML for some configuration. There's some JSON files in there for configuration. There's some CFG files to do some configuration. There's some INI files for some other configuration. There's even Markdown for some documentation in there. There's JavaScript if you're using Classic. There's Webpack. Depending on, I'm not even talking about, I mean, if you're using Volto, or I think that Webpack is also used in the Classic, well, you have to learn some CSS more framework. Maybe we have used XSLT in the past for transforms. Build out, not needed anymore, I guess, but you had to know it. Everybody's favorite KSS is in there. I think it's not used anymore. Maybe I heard some people using still Plone 2 or older than 3, so there's definitely KSS in there. We had Portal Skins, we had restricted Python, and we have even had DTML, like old stuff. So I tried to simplify that. So in Nick, there's only JavaScript, obviously, for code. So everything which is written is JavaScript. Everything is data, that's JSON. Nothing else, and everything which is documentation is Markdown. So there's 3 languages you need to learn, and I think JavaScript and JSON are pretty similar, and Markdown is, yeah. So that's the only 3 languages there are in the whole repository, nothing else. So that's the thing you need to learn. Storage-wise, I'm using a Postgres backend, mainly because it's a really good transactional database. It has really nice JSON integration, so you can actually easily search within the JSON as well. There's really good text indexing. Obviously, if you want to have even more advanced stuff, you can use something like Elasticsearch or any of the other search engine on top of that. But this is already a really good start. I'm using an ORM, Knex below level, and Objection, which is the bit higher level ORM, and that's all. There's some additional libraries, but there's not like a list of, like a normal JavaScript package where you have like 2,000 dependencies. So it's just really, yeah, not much stuff to learn and not much stuff to maintain and to upgrade once you're at it. File storage is easy, just blob storage on disk. Tried several other approaches, but this is by far the simplest and by far the fastest. Yeah. So some numbers, definitely not a full, complete list, but some stuff to compare. So language, as I said, Python, Nick has wrote in Node. Has some advantages by default. Node being async, Python, it's possible to do async, but it's not like everything. Not everything is written in async, and Nick does because Node is async by default. Storage, Plone uses ZODB. Obviously, you can do it in rel storage to do it in Postgres. Nick does it there by default. Lines of code. Any guessers? Were you close with your guess? Yeah, that's quite a lot of code, 2 lines of code to maintain, right? Yes. Okay, what do you think Nick has? Okay, so it's slightly less. Yeah, so it's, yeah. So if you, apparently if you strip a lot of overhead and bulk, you can do more or less the same functionality with a lot less code, which means a lot of less stuff to maintain and hopefully less bugs. But I guess we'll find out when we have some real life examples. So performance, how does it perform? Always nice to know, right? I mean, you can write something really nice, and if one request takes 80 seconds to complete, then it's not very useful to have. So I think Plone in general is pretty performant in most of the situations. So I'm not sure if we have a big issues there. But I did do performance testing just to have a quick indication of how it does compare to it. So big disclaimer, this is my laptop. These are the versions I used. I didn't do a full performance test of every single call there is with everything, but this is just a generic idea of that you can see how it performs. So I used latest Plone, latest Nick, used Postman to do the request and the performance tests. I tested API only, so there's no Volto, anything in between. So it's just the API calls which are tested because that's, I think, the most apples to apples comparisons you can get. Yeah, so going to reads. This simple test, I have 100 concurrent users fetching the site route. I only have one slide here because the results are so similar. The reads are not that different. I think there's like 1 millisecond difference maybe from one to the other. So I think performance-wise, this is just like plain content, nothing else installed, no add-ons, no nothing. If you do more complex pages, then I'm guessing there could be slight differences. Looking at writes, then there would you see some differences. So this is, I'm not sure if you can read it. Yeah, I think so. There we go. I think it's doable. So I did a test with 20 concurrent users. So the average response time per request is 243 milliseconds, and you get an error rate of 2%, meaning you have some database conflicts there if you really step on it and have like lots of different writes at the same time. So remember those 2 numbers. So if we look at Nick, we have an error rate of 0, which is nice, and there's an average response time of 59 milliseconds. So that's like a factor 4.5-ish faster than Plone does. Then we're going to look at some stuff which, like bulk operations, stuff where you can actually really see differences and maybe can see some stuff which is generally fairly slow in Plone. So if we're going to look at some content with a lot of nodes in there. So we have I created a simple page here. I generated 1,000 subpages in there and delete those folder. So if we look at Plone, it's taking a bit over 2 seconds to remove that folder. And in Nick, it's 136 milliseconds. So that's like a big change. If we go even higher with numbers, like 10,000 pages in there, subpages, it's 30 seconds in Plone and it's 400 milliseconds in Nick. So that's quite a big difference from, I'm not sure if you would do that on a daily basis. I hope not. But I guess some of that stuff will happen and it will take a long time. Last one, I think this is not common, but I think this is used in sites, and at least we have some issues with it as well. The people say, oh, we want to rename the one of the main navigation items, and I just get a timeout and it doesn't work. Here you see why. So if you have a page with 10,000 items, it takes in Plone it takes almost 85 or 84 seconds, and in Nick it takes 4. So that's something. 4 seconds you won't get a timeout. 83 seconds you will most likely get a timeout, or definitely think you get a timeout because it's taking that long. So these are really big performance improvements. As I said, this is not a complete guide of all the performance issues, of all the performance, but we have like a general idea of that. Like on the read part, it's already like on par and the same, and on writes, it's Nick is slightly faster, and on bulk items, it's a lot faster. So how do you build your site? If you want to set your own project, just thought about it. Maybe next year I'll do some training about Nick, that so people can have some hands-on experience. But for now, I will do some of the stuff which you can do to write your own, create your own website basically. So first we need a database, right? So we create a Postgres database, or you do something fancy with Docker or anything, but I just have it run locally, create a database with a project name and a very secure username and password, as you can see. Then there's some Yeoman generators where you can bootstrap your project. So you basically install the generator, and then you'll generate your project. And you can bootstrap it. So bootstrap, what the bootstrap command does is basically install all the packages, create a sample configuration file, and get you started. Configuration file. This is a sample one, which you can override if you want to. So basically contains not that much settings, but some. So this is the connection of the database. It's connecting to where your blocks are stored. The port it's running on, the secret is used for encryption, and some other settings like core settings, image scales, where the front end is located, and profiles, which I'll get to what those are and how they are used. So fairly clean and fairly simple configuration. And if you want to run Volto with Nick, you can basically use any of the Bootstrap scripts to create your own Volto project. And in the config, the only things you need to change is your backend, meaning that it has to be on 88,000 instead of 8080. And this is, you have to add this because I will probably fix this in Volto, but it's like a small hack because it doesn't, or else it won't work. But these configuration settings, and then it'll work. So you can start your page and you'll have your website running. And you have something like this. This is a slightly themed Volto page, but it's mainly, if you know Volto already, there's no difference, and that's the whole idea. So the idea is you just have a page and you have items and you can navigate to them and you can edit them. It all looks the same. There's no, from a user perspective, you shouldn't see any changes because all the fields are there, all the input is there. There's no changes. Right, profiles. So profiles are pretty similar as they are in Plone. Meaning we have profiles with all the data in there, with all the settings, but it also can contain content, users, everything is basically in there, which you can use to set up your site or make changes to your site. What all these separate things do, I will get to, but when you want to run them, you can do yarn seed, which runs all your profiles. Or you can do reset, which is nice for development, to just resets your whole data structure and applies all the new profiles again. So that's nice to have. So there's also a conversion tool for Plone, which I started writing yesterday because because David bugged me to do so. And the basic version is there, so it uses the data exported from Plone export import. And what you can do is you run yarn convert the input folder. That's the folder which Plone export import returns, and the output folder is a profile folder in Nick. So you can just export your site and import it in Nick with the same content. Um, yeah, so profiles have versionings as well, meaning a profile can have like a default version, but there's also upgrades. So you can do multiple versions of your profile. So if you want to change something similar as you do in Plone, if you want to have a new version with new groups or new permissions in there, you can upgrade it, and you can check with join seed status to see if all profiles are up to date or not. And if they're not, run upgrade, and it will just apply the upgrades to your website to have the new settings or the new data in there. So content types. If you want to create new content types, as I said, all the data is JSON. That means in a profile we have a types folder, and it can contain several content types. For this example, I made a schedule and I made a talk content type. Schedule content type. It's a JSON schema, so it's actually the same as the REST API returns, or you want to add to your REST API, and it's a fixed definition, right? So we have an ID title, we have the schema with the field sets, we have all the properties in there, what fields are required, what workflow is applied, and the behaviors. I'll get to that in a bit. Another content type, same thing, some different fields. So behaviors, as we'll have in Dexterity as well, Nick also does have behaviors. There's some behaviors there by default. So we have the doubling core, obviously, we have dates, blocks, nav root, folderish, versioning, short name, ID from title, and exclusive from nav. So these are the behaviors which are there by default, but you can create your own, which I will show in a bit. Behaviors are also, or there can be schemas. So if your behavior contains any fields or anything like that, there's in your profile folder, there's a behavior folder with the JSON containing the behavior, and the behavior field looks pretty similar to a content type, just as a schema with some fields which will be added to your content type. Something which Plone cannot do and Nick can is nested behaviors. So you can actually, a behavior can also have behaviors, meaning, for example, like doubling core might have multiple other behaviors which have eventually come up to the same behavior. So you can better structure your behaviors and have them even more specific for that certain thing and be able to reuse those. You can also have class-based behaviors, meaning behaviors which have functionality. In this case, ID, like ID from title is one of them examples, and here I will create a custom one, which is ID and title from year. So that's one of the schedule ones. So basically, if you look at the document model, which is in Nick by default, it's a class called document, and it has some methods which are used in Nick, and all these methods can be overridden to create your own functionality or change the functionality within Nick. So meaning like, I don't know, like set ID or get title or all that stuff. By default, it will just return the title. But if I override this method in my behavior, then that content type or all the content types which have that behavior applied will act differently. So here I write a behavior which changes the ID, the set ID method, which will, instead of having the ID, it will just put schedule dash and then the year of the schedule. And it will also fill in the title automatically, which will be the schedule, and then the year is passed to it instead of the actual title of the object. Looking at initial content, so if you want to populate your website, you can add some data in there. This is slightly based on the Kit Concept Content Creator package. Also pretty similar to all the collective or Plone import, export, export, import. I think I just found out yesterday there's 3 of them. There's even a Plone.import export and a Plone.export import. One of them is in a collective and one of them is in a Plone repository to make things a lot easier. Anyway, so this is the initial content. So you have a nested structure of all the documents with a dot notation, meaning, so this is the folder and then this is a subfolder. So we have schedule, and then we have Nick as a subfolder, and this is another one, which is also a subfolder of that one. And then you can have images and files and videos and ever into the same folder as well, and you can link them. So what does it look like? It's a simple JSON structure with all the fields in there. So you can specify your UID if you want to. If not, then it'll generate one. It says which type it is, which and the other fields. So the workflow, workflow state, and the year and the owner, etc. Here is a slightly more complex content type with more fields. So it's a talk content type. It has all the data, and then there's the picture attribute, which refers to the file on disk. And if you specify it like this, then it will import that file as well, and point to that one. If you want to, you can also import versions into Nick. So basically, if you have this is just a page, and if you want to have the version history in there, well, if you want to export that from Plone or create initial versions, you can do so with all the changes of all the different versions which are there. And also the workflow history. So if stuff got approved or withdrawn or published or stuff like that. Redirects can also be imported. So you have the original path and the ID where the current document is referring to. So permission system. I think this is one of the strong points of Plone. As we know, Plone is really secure, and this permission system is really, really flexible. I think some of the other projects which have been using or wanted to be compatible with the Plone API before, like Guillotina, and I think I'm not sure if Substance D is probably not API compatible, but like want to have the same functionality. I think they also had a look at the permission system, but most of them made it a bit easier to implement because it's a lot to do. Because what do we have in Plone? We have permissions, we have roles, which can have permissions, we have groups, which can have roles, we have users, who can have roles and can be part of a group. We have local roles, meaning a user and or a group can have a role at a certain page, at a certain stage at the site. Those local roles can be inherited, or you can decide that they won't be inherited. And then lastly, we have workflows, which have states, and those also have permissions based on what state that is. So all in all, that's a lot of stuff, right? So that means there's a lot of things to take into account whether or not you have access to it. I'm happy to say that Nick supports all of this. So it's not, I didn't take any shortcuts there. So all the security and all the things you can do in Plone, you can also do in Nick. So all the local roles, all the inheritance, everything is in there. Yeah, transition. So how can you set them up? So permissions, simple. They are, I have IDs and I have a title. That's about it. These are the global ones, and you can add your own ones if you add it to your own project there. Roles, what they have ID, title, and they have an array of or a list associated with Python people to permissions. Then if you want to add them to your project as well, you can have a file there as well. Users, we can have the username, password, stuff like that, and which groups they belong to. And we can add groups, same as there. So workflow, also, well, more or less the same as in Plone. So we have states, we have transitions, we have permissions on those transitions and permissions on the states. And so if you can read JSON, which I assume I hope you can, then all of this configuration stuff is in there. So we have workflow states, we have initial states, and we have the transitions here, and it's all guarded by permissions in that case. Yeah, I'll skip this one. Sharing. So you can do sharing in the UI, obviously, when you run it, but you can also do it on when you import your content. So here we have a content object called schedule. and we have the sharing enabled. So we say user me has the role reader at this stage of the site, and we have the group editor, or we have the group program managers, which have the editor permission in there. Vocabularies, multiple versions of it. One is you can do it from a file system based, so you can just write whatever vocabulary you want to return. In this case, it's just static text, but you can also fetch it from the database, of course, or from an external API, or whatever you want your vocabulary data to come from. If you have fixed values, you can also do just data, JSON data. So we have a ID title, and we have the items in there, which have a token and a title, which will show up in the vocabulary. And the vocabularies can be used. Here we go. So we have a field called length, and if you want to use a vocabulary, we'll just say vocabulary, and we point to the ID, to the what the name of the vocabulary is. Search. So we have a catalog as well, meaning we can write indexes, and we have metadata, same as we do in the Plone catalog. So we can, by default, there's obviously a lot of indexes already, and metadata as well, and we can write our own. Indexes are, you can add pretty similar settings as you would normally do in Plone as well. So they have a name, it has a type. There's operators which you can use on it. So basically, if it's string, you can have a contains operator, or if similar to that one. And we have some metadata fields which are, and we have some metadata fields which also have a name and a type, and the attribute, that's basically the method which it's using to index those fields. So you can add those indexes to your content type as well if you want to use those behaviors. So in this case, we have the author index. What does it do? So it will basically return the first name and the last name. So we'd have that in one field, and it's indexed, so we can use it in one of the search results. And that's just field author. If we have the total time index, it's a bit more complex. So what does it do? It's an index on the schedule, and it fetches all the talks, and it checks what the total amount of time of all the things combined is. So it maps over the children, checks what the length of the talk will be, and it adds either 30 or 45 minutes depending on the length of the talk. Events. So there's a lot of events there by default which you can hook into. So there's on before add, after modified, on before copy, and this is not the full list, but there's on most of the stuff there's events which you can use to do stuff basically. So it looks like this. On before add, you get the context of so actually where it's called. You get a transaction thing, and you can have parameters depending on what your event is doing. So in this case, we have created an event called reindex parent on modified. So that means if we modify an item, we can reindex the parent in this case. So we're going to check. So what do we do? We check if the current content type is a talk. If it's not, then we return. If it is, then we'll fetch our parent. As we do now, and we reindex our parent. That's all. Same thing we do on the after add. This is simple, like short index, but it can, or an event, but it can do anything you want basically. Control panels. So control panels are did slightly different than Plone does. Plone usually has control panels, and then we have the registry, which is big and has a lot of settings in there and a lot of stuff, which is, for me at least, I thought it was way too complex of what you actually need within your project. So what did I do? I simplified it a bit, and what I did, you have a folder called control panels, and it contains a control panel for each of the control panels you want to have with all those settings in there. And those settings are JSON schemas, as is everything. So meaning we have a control panel venue in this case. It's a JSON schema, and it has some fields like name, address, and website in this case. And when you add this to there, that means you'll have an editing interface in Nick or in Volto where you can edit those values. And if you want to get the values and use them somewhere, you can do it like this. So there's an object called in the control panel model. You fetch it by ID, in this case venue. You'll get the data, and then you have access to the name, the address, and the website fields. So not much looking up, it's just a simple structure with just a control panel, and they have values, and you can fetch them. Yeah, by default, there's already a lot of control panels in there, like navigation control panel, for example. So the navigation has some settings, like whether or not you have additional items, whether or not you want to display certain types or not. This will come in from Plone if you apply the default or the core profile, and you can override those settings in your own project. So let's say you want to have your display types to be different, then you can, in this case, folder and page are by default, and you can add the schedule one. In this case, so just add it to your to the array. Almost done. I18N. So obviously we want to have everything multilingual in Plone on all levels, meaning first written in code. So Nick uses get text as well. So we have the PO files which we're used to. It will generate JSON files to be used in the applications but it's still the same functionality as we're currently used to in Plone. We have a script called yarn18n, which you can use to extract all those strings and merge them. And you can translate something or have something marked for translation by this. So you have to request, and the request has an I18N method, and you pass in a string, and supports all the usual stuff with variables and all that stuff. You can also do I18N and JSON, which you might have seen in the examples already. So if you have JSON data and you mark it with colon I18N, then this will be translated as well when you return it in one of the API calls. Simple logging is there. It's based on log4j.s, which you can use. There's an access log, the error log, and all sorts of stuff, and you can extend your own logging in there. Testing. So a lot of testing is done through the documentation, meaning there's, as I said, you saw there's a lot of documentation available for the API calls, and they have examples with a request and a result, and those are used in the test as well. So basically you run the documentation, so you know that your documentation is always, well, working, because that's actually being live tested or tested on every pull request. So you know it actually works like it's supposed to. So you have a request file which will get the which will specify your request, and you specify what the results should be, and you can run those with some helper methods. So you basically say, okay, this is my test, this is where my folder is located, which I want to where my request and my result files are, and then it will do the test. So no need to write. Yep, no need to write something more specific. You can do yarn test for your project or in Nick itself, and then it will run the past tests, and it will either pass in this case or it won't, and then you have to fix it, obviously. Documentation, as I said, there's some boilerplate documentation in your own project, which you can use to write a markdown documentation, and then you get something fancy like this for your own project. And for Nick, there's extended documentation already available in the same format. Yeah, that's it. So my talk will be here. It's not there yet. If you want to have a look at the example content I just showed, it's also in my repository, so you can run this example, which I showed with all the things in there. And if you're brave enough to use Nick in production or for your own pet project or whatever, then talk to me and I will gladly help you out. Yeah, that's it. Any questions? Guido. I think he's gonna ask me if the classic UI will work on top of this.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Yeah, my main question is like, what was the main or most interesting challenge that you had to overcome to make all of this work?
Good question. So there were a lot of difficult stuff to implement. So like I basically postponed the implementation of the whole security system because I thought it was really complex. And when you look at the list, it is. But when you take it one step at a time, it's not that complex. And the good thing about, so I made this, well, just in my spare time, and I did a lot of coding during conferences and sprints. And the good thing about that is that there was all people around who implemented the same thing or knew how the stuff was implemented in Plone. So I just book David or Philip or whoever has knowledge about something specific, and I worked on it. So I think the permission system was definitely one of the most hard things to implement. But just talking to a lot of knowledgeable people in the community to see, okay, how did Plone actually solve this, and how did they make it performant and stuff like that. That helped me a lot to do that. Yeah. But if you just take everything one step at a time, then it's all small tasks, and then you get something big at the end. Yeah. Paul.
Just in theory, how would you implement plugins or add-ons? The most obvious being probably OAuth or another authentication plugin, or let's say a form plugin, because people want forms, or another add-on.
Yeah, so Nick uses packages as it's pretty similar to a Plone project in that way that you have your dependency on Plone, and now you have your dependency on Nick, which will drag in the default stuff. Then you have your project, your main project package basically, which is will just grab in other stuff, and then you can have add-ons which add functionality as well. And your main project is also, you can override stuff in there, but you can also do that in an add-on package in there as well. So it's fairly similar as to what Plone does in that sense. Yeah, but yeah. So and then again, I mean, it's always, since it uses Volto, I guess we have the same with Plone, that you both get a backend and a front end component of that package, and that might make things maybe slightly simpler because you could actually combine those if you want to, and have them both dependency with your backend code and your front end code, both of them in there. Yeah, but it's all pretty similar than in Plone. Oh. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Then thank you very much.
A round of applause, please.